The Costume Party Massacre. I was 23 years old, attending what would become the most traumatic night of my life at my college roommate Tyler's Halloween bash. Tyler had rented this massive Victorian house on the edge of campus specifically for his legendary Halloween parties. Every October 31st, he transformed the place into something straight out of a nightmare. This particular year, he'd gone all out with animatronic zombies, fog machines pumping through every hallway, and walls draped in blood-stained sheets that hung like curtains of death. I'll keep this appropriate and skip past the usual college party activities, but around 1 a.m., things took a horrifying turn. Me, Tyler, and three of our closest friends, Marcus, Devin, and Chris, were in the upstairs study taking a break from the chaos below when we heard it. Three thunderous bangs echoed through the house, cutting through the heavy bass of the music, like gunshots through silence. Tyler stumbled toward the door, his hand shaking as he reached for the knob. Before he could turn it, the screaming started. Not the playful Halloween screams we'd been hearing all night, but genuine terror. Blood-curdling shrieks of pure panic, rising from downstairs like a tidal wave of fear. We all shouted for Tyler to lock the door, our altered states suddenly crystal clear with adrenaline. He slammed it shut, turning the deadbolt with a click that felt like sealing a tomb. When he turned back to face us, his face had drained of all color. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated with shock. "There are men with guns," he whispered, his voice cracking. "They're wearing masks." We didn't need to be told twice. Tyler killed the lights and dove into the closet with Marcus. I squeezed under the antique desk with Chris, while Devin somehow contorted himself behind a bookshelf. The music downstairs cut out abruptly, replaced by a man's voice roaring commands we couldn't quite make out. Then came another bang. Then silence. The kind of silence that screams louder than any sound. Heavy boots climbed the stairs, each footstep a countdown to our potential deaths. They stopped right outside our door. The doorknob rattled violently. When it didn't give, the intruder threw his weight against the door. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th attempt, 2 shots rang out, splintering the doorknob into pieces. The door swung open with a haunting creak. Through the crack beneath the desk, I watched black tactical boots move deliberately across the hardwood floor. They went straight for the closet. The door flew open, and I heard Tyler's voice break as he begged for his life, offering everything he had. He admitted he was the one who organized the party, that his parents owned the house. The man ordered Tyler downstairs. Marcus stayed hidden in the back of the closet, somehow undetected. The boots left the room, taking Tyler with them. We stayed frozen in our hiding spots, barely breathing, for what felt like an eternity. Muffled voices drifted up from below, but we couldn't make out the words. 25 minutes later, we heard the front door slam. Tyler's footsteps pounded back up the stairs. "They're gone," he shouted. "They're gone." Walking back into that living room is something that will haunt me until my last breath. 2 bodies lay motionless on the blood-soaked carpet. Sarah and Brandon, 2 people I'd known since freshman year. 2 friends who'd never hurt anyone, shot execution style in the center of their foreheads. The image of their lifeless eyes staring at nothing will never leave me. The police came. Surprisingly, they didn't arrest anyone for the obvious drug use. They were too focused on finding the killers. Tyler later told us there had been 5 intruders, all wearing black suits, white Guy Fawkes masks, and leather gloves. They demanded $150,000 in cash. When Tyler couldn't produce it, they forced everyone to empty their pockets, their wallets, their jewelry into a duffel bag. They took phones, laptops, anything valuable. Tyler was never the same after that night. The guilt consumed him like a cancer. He started drinking heavily, missing classes, disappearing for days at a time. 6 months later, he dropped out completely. The last time I saw him, really saw him, he broke down crying in my apartment, telling me he couldn't escape the faces of Sarah and Brandon, that their deaths were his fault for throwing the party. Tyler died of an overdose in August 2014, just 10 months after the massacre. The killers were never caught. Sometimes I wonder if Tyler's death was accidental, or the weight of that Halloween night finally became too much to carry. Hashtag story 2, the bedroom intruder. It was my first Halloween living alone in a small 2-bedroom house I'd purchased with help from my parents in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. October 31st fell on a Saturday that year, and by 10:30 p.m., I figured the trick-or-treaters were done for the night. I was on my couch watching a Halloween movie marathon when I heard knocking at the front door. I glanced at the clock, 10:45 p.m., way too late for kids. I walked to the window and peeked through the curtain just in time to see a figure disappear from my porch. Ding-dong ditchers. Great. I settled back onto the couch, annoyed but not worried. Then it happened again. This time, I didn't even get up. Get lost. I yelled toward the door, hoping they'd hear me and move on to someone else's house. The knocking turned into pounding. Aggressive, angry pounding that made my windows rattle. My irritation turned to anger. I stormed the front door and yanked it open, ready to scare off whatever punk kids thought this was funny. No one was there. I slipped on my sneakers and went outside, checking behind bushes, around my car, across the street. Nothing. Not a single person in sight on the entire block. The neighborhood was dead silent. I went back inside, locked both deadbolts, and headed to my bedroom. I locked that door too, just in case. Even with my TV on, I could still hear the pounding at my front door continuing. It went on for over 40 minutes straight. I almost called the police, but I didn't want to deal with the retaliation. Egged house, slashed tires, the usual teenage revenge tactics. Eventually, I fell asleep with the TV on. I woke up to knocking. The clock read 2:47 a.m. My heart dropped into my stomach when I realized the knocking wasn't coming from the front door. It was coming from my bedroom door, from inside my house. I shot up in bed, my eyes scanning the room for anything I could use as a weapon. They knew I was awake now. The doorknob started turning, twisting back and forth as whoever was on the other side tried to get in. Then they started throwing their weight against the door, trying to break through. In a moment of desperate inspiration, I grabbed my phone, opened YouTube, and searched for gunshot sound effects. I connected it to my Bluetooth speaker, cranked the volume to maximum, and pressed play. Bang. The gunshot sound exploded through my bedroom. So realistic it made my ears ring. That was a warning shot. I screamed, "Leave now, or I'll put a bullet in your skull." Silence. Then footsteps. 2 sets of footsteps running through my house, followed by the sound of my front door slamming open. I waited 5 full minutes before opening my bedroom door. The house was empty, but my front door was wide open, swinging slightly in the night breeze. I slammed it shut, triple-checked every lock, and called the police. They found fresh pry marks on my back door and disturbed dirt beneath my bedroom window, where someone had been standing, watching. 2 sets of footprints led away from my house toward the woods behind my neighborhood. I moved out 3 weeks later. I couldn't sleep in that house anymore, knowing strangers had been inside, standing outside my bedroom door at 3 a.m. The police never found out who they were or what they wanted. Sometimes not knowing is the most terrifying part. Hashtag story 3, the Halloween caller. I was 15 years old and home alone on Halloween night, handing out candy to trick-or-treaters while my mom took my younger brother Ethan out. He was 9 and still obsessed with Halloween, so Mom said they'd be out until at least 9:30 p.m. I was actually excited to be home. I'd set myself up on the couch with horror movies, a huge bowl of candy for me and the kids, and orders to keep the porch light on. My best friend Jake had plans with his family, so this was my night to relax and enjoy the spooky atmosphere. Around 7:45 p.m., the house phone rang. We still had a landline back then, and the ringer was set so loud it made me jump every time. I picked up. Hello. Silence. Just some rustling sounds, like someone was holding the phone, but not talking. I could hear breathing. Hello. I said again. Nothing. They hung up. I figured it was just a prank call. It was Halloween after all. Kids pulling stupid jokes. I went back to my movie and handed out candy to a few more groups of trick-or-treaters. The phone rang again 15 minutes later. Same unknown number on the caller ID. This time I decided to play along. Hello. Again, just breathing. Slow, deliberate breathing. Real funny, Jake. I know it's you. I try to sound confident, like I'd figured out his prank. They hung up. Now I was genuinely uncomfortable. The house felt bigger, emptier. The spaces between trick-or-treaters were getting longer as it got later. I was watching Friday the 13th when the phone rang a third time. I almost didn't pick up, but something made me grab it. Hello? Breathing, fumbling, silence that stretched for 30 seconds. Then, in a voice that was definitely not Jake's, a deep, distorted, almost mechanical voice, they spoke. I'll be paying you a visit tonight. I slammed the phone down, my hand shaking. Screw this, I said out loud to no one. I sat back down, promising myself I wouldn't answer again. But the call had rattled me. Every shadow looked darker. Every creak of the house settling sounded like footsteps. About 45 minutes later, all the lights went out. Every single one. The TV died. The house was plunged into complete darkness. I stood up, frozen in the middle of the living room, when violent pounding erupted at the front door. Bang, 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 bang. I screamed. I couldn't help it. Then I heard laughter from outside. Familiar laughter. I ran to the door and yanked it open. Jake was standing there, doubled over laughing, holding his phone up with a flashlight. You asshole! I shoved him. That was you calling? He nodded, still cracking up. Dude, you should have heard yourself scream. Do the voice, I demanded. Do that voice you did on the phone. His smile faded. What voice? I didn't say anything. I just called and did the breathing thing. My stomach dropped. Jake. Someone called and said they were going to visit me tonight. That wasn't me, man. I just called twice and breathed into the phone. I didn't say a word. We looked at each other, the realization hitting us both at the same time. I grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the side of the house where the electrical box was located. The metal panel was hanging open, and every single wire had been cut clean, deliberate cuts with wire cutters. We ran back inside, and I called my mom. She told us to lock every door and window and wait for police, who she'd call immediately. The police traced the final call to a payphone outside a bar 3 miles from my house. Someone had been calling me, threatening me, while Jake was coincidentally pulling a prank. The police asked if I'd had any conflicts with anyone, if there was someone who might want to scare me. I couldn't think of anyone. They increased patrols in our neighborhood for next week, but nothing else happened. I've spent years wondering if it was just an extreme prank that went too far, or if someone really had planned a break-in that night, and Jake's arrival scared them off. The timing was too perfect. If Jake hadn't shown up exactly when he did, would someone have been waiting in that dark house for me? I still don't know. And honestly, I don't want to find out. Hashtag Story4, the mass follower. When I was 12, my friends and I went trick-or-treating in our neighborhood like we did every year. We had our route planned out. The houses that gave full-size candy bars, the ones that had the best decorations, the usual spots. We were about an hour into the night when we passed a man standing completely still on someone's lawn. He was wearing a white porcelain mask with no expression, just blank features, and holding an old-fashioned lantern that flickered with real flame. He was dressed in a long black coat that went down to his ankles. As we walked past him, his entire body rotated to follow us. Not just his head, his whole body, like a statue being turned on a platform. His eyes behind that mask locked onto us and didn't look away. We laughed it off nervously and kept walking to the next house. When we turned around after getting our candy, he was gone from that lawn, but we saw him again, and again, and again, every street we turned down. He was there somewhere, standing under a tree, on a porch, beside a parked car. Always perfectly still until we passed, then turned to watch us leave. He never got closer, but he never fell behind either. We started walking faster. He kept pace. How is he keeping up with us? My friend Danny whispered. We're practically running. At one house. We didn't see him anywhere. We thought maybe he'd finally gone home, that the joke was over. We got our candy and turned back toward the street. He was standing in the middle of the road, directly in our path, that lantern swinging slightly in his hand. We immediately ran back to the door and knocked frantically. The woman who answered looked concerned as we pointed at the man in the street. She yelled at him to leave or she'd call the police. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching us from behind that expressionless white mask. The woman pulled out her phone and started dialing. Only then did he turn and walk away, disappearing around the corner. We were too scared to keep trick-or-treating, so we called my dad to pick us up. While we waited, another pair we knew came up to us and asked if we'd seen that creepy guy in the mask. He said he'd spotted the masked man hiding behind a tree, waving at little kids who were by themselves, trying to get them to come closer. He'd chased the guy off by threatening to call the police. That's when we realized this wasn't just someone committed to a scary costume. This was someone targeting children. My dad filed a police report when he picked us up. Other parents did the same. The police increased patrols that night, but they never found him. No one in our neighborhood knew who he was or where he came from. For years after, I'd have nightmares about that blank white mask turning to follow me, about that silent figure appearing on every street no matter how fast I ran. Hashtag story 5, the black Jeep. I was trick-or-treating with my best friend Morgan when we were both 12 years old. We've been friends since kindergarten and had our Halloween routine down to a science. Our neighborhood had a small wooden footbridge that crossed over a creek called Willow Run, and was the quickest way to get to the houses on the other side where the rich families lived, the ones who gave out the best candy. We were halfway across the bridge when a black Jeep pulled up on the opposite end, completely blocking our path. The windows were tinted so dark we couldn't see inside. We stopped walking. Something felt wrong immediately. We turned around and started heading back the way we came, walking quickly but trying not to run. Behind us, we heard the Jeep's windows rolling down. A man's voice called out to us, rough and raspy like he'd smoked cigarettes his whole life. "Girls, hey girls, come here. I need help." We didn't stop. We'd both been taught about stranger danger since we were little. "I'm lost," he yelled. "I just need directions. Please." I yelled back, "Sorry," without turning around, and we started walking faster. The Jeep couldn't fit on the narrow footbridge, so we thought we were safe. We heard it pull away, tires squealing as it drove off down the road on the other side of the creek. We let out a breath of relief and kept walking. We were almost at the end of the bridge when we heard an engine roaring. The black Jeep came flying around the corner onto our side of the creek, tires screeching as it slammed to a stop directly in front of us. The doors flew open. 3 men got out. The driver was younger, maybe late 20s, with a buzz cut and a face tattoo. The other 2 were older, one with curly gray hair and a thick mustache, the other completely bald with a scar running down his cheek. The old guy with the mustache smiled at us, revealing yellow teeth. "Get in the car, girls." We got bags of full-size candy bars. The good stuff, Snickers, Reese's, all of it. We stood frozen for a second. Then Morgan grabbed my hand and we ran. We dropped our candy bags and ran as fast as our legs would carry us toward my house, which was now visible at the end of the street. Behind us, we heard the men shouting and their footsteps pounding the pavement. They were chasing us. I've never been more grateful that my house was close. We could see my porch light. We could see my dad's car in the driveway. We were almost there. We hit my porch and rang the doorbell over and over, screaming for someone to open the door. I looked back and saw the 2 older men had stopped halfway down the street, too out of breath to keep running. The younger guy was back at the Jeep, which was now backing up and turning around. My mom threw the door open, took one look at our faces and the men in the street, and yanked us inside. She locked the door and immediately called 911. The police arrived within 10 minutes. My mom described everything. The black Jeep, the 3 men, their attempt to lure us into their vehicle. The officer said they'd been getting reports all night about a black Jeep following kids around the neighborhood. They asked if the men knew where we lived now. My mom's face went pale. "Yes," she whispered. They watched the girls run to this house. The police agreed to park an unmarked car in front of our house for the rest of the night. My mom was a mess, pacing the house, checking locks, looking out windows every few minutes. My dad tried to calm her down, but none of us could really relax. Around 2 a.m., we were all woken up by flashing red and blue lights outside. My dad went to the window and called us over. The unmarked police car had pulled over a black Jeep right in front of our house. 3 men were in handcuffs on the sidewalk. My dad went outside to talk to the officers. Me and Morgan crept to the doorway to watch. When the men looked up and saw us, we both flipped them off. My mom pulled us back inside and sent us to bed, but we were both grinning. They'd come back. They'd actually driven back to our street at 2 a.m., and the police were waiting for them. We found out later they had a history of child abduction attempts in 3 different cities. Our testimony helped put them away. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if we'd gotten in that car, if we believed their lies about candy. I think about the kids who maybe weren't as lucky as we were. Hashtag story 6, the closet. This happened when my daughter Emma was 8 years old. I'd taken her trick-or-treating for about 3 hours, and by the time we got home, we were both exhausted. I made us some dinner. We watched a Halloween movie together, and around 10 p.m. I sent her to bed. I was tired too, so I brushed my teeth and climbed into bed, maybe 20 minutes after her. I was just starting to drift off when my door opened. Emma stood in the doorway, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. "Mom, there's someone in my closet." I sighed, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. Every parent knows this routine. The monsters on the bed, the things in the closet. "Honey, there's no one in your closet. It's just your imagination." "But I heard them moving around," she insisted. "You can sleep with me if you're scared." She shook her head. "Can you just come check?" I told her to go back to bed and that everything would be fine. She left reluctantly, and I felt guilty, but I was just so tired. Halloween had been a long day. 5 minutes later, she was back. This time I sat up. "Emma, why do you think someone's in your closet?" "I heard someone moving things around, and something fell over." The way she said it made something cold run down my spine. She wasn't crying or whining. She was serious, almost calm, like she was just stating a fact. I got out of bed and walked her back to her room. I flipped on the light. "Is anybody in there?" I called out in a joking voice, trying to lighten the mood. We stood there listening. I expected silence. I expected to show Emma there was nothing to worry about. Then we heard it, a definite thud from inside her closet. Something, or someone, had knocked something over. "Emma, run to the neighbors," I said, my voice shaking. "Tell them to call 911. Right now. Go!" She took off running. I heard the front door slam behind her. I took a breath, grabbed a baseball bat from the hallway closet, and walked back to Emma's room. I stood in front of her closet door for what felt like an eternity. Then I yanked it open. Karen's eyes went wide when she saw me dragging her son. I shoved Tyler through the doorway and explained everything to his dad, Mike, who'd appeared from the living room. Mike's face went from confused or horrified to absolutely furious in about 3 seconds. He asked me if I was going to press charges. "Not if this never happens again," I said. "But if I ever catch him near my daughter again, you'll all be sorry." Mike slapped Tyler across the face hard, right there in front of all of us. Then he asked me and Emma to come inside, so Tyler could explain himself. The neighbor's son, Tyler, was sitting on top of Emma's toy box, squeezed into the corner of the closet. He was 16 years old and had no business being in my house, let alone hiding in my daughter's closet. I lost it. I grabbed him by his shirt collar and dragged him out of the closet, out of the room, and out of my house. I marched him directly to his parents' front door next door, where Emma was standing with Tyler's mom, Karen. Apparently, Tyler hadn't been alone. While I'd been out trick-or-treating with Emma, Tyler and his friend Austin had snuck into our house through a window I'd left cracked in the kitchen. They'd hidden in Emma's closet, planning to scare her. "Where's Austin?" I demanded. Tyler said he was probably still in the house. I told Emma to stay with Mike and Karen while I ran back home. I burst through the front door, and there he was, Austin, standing in my living room, holding a pair of Emma's underwear in his hands. I've never felt rage like that in my entire life. I grabbed him by the throat and threw him to the ground. I slapped him 4 times across the face before I let him get up and run out of my house. The only reason I didn't call the police was because Mike was a good friend and I knew he'd handle Tyler. But I made it absolutely clear that if those boys ever so much as looked at my daughter again, there would be consequences. Emma slept in my bed that night. She was traumatized, and honestly, so was I. A 16-year-old boy had been hiding in my 8-year-old daughter's closet, playing with her underwear. The next morning, I found a small hole drilled in Emma's closet door. Those sick bastards had been watching her sleep, spying on her getting dressed. Emma's 14 now. Tyler went away to college last year. Nothing's happened since that night, and sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing by not involving the police. But he was just a kid, and Mike dealt with it seriously. I still think about it, though. I still wonder what could have happened if Emma hadn't heard them, if she'd just fallen asleep like usual. Some nights, I lie awake thinking about that drill hole in the closet door, about what they might have seen, about what they might have been planning to do, and I wonder if letting them go was mercy or a mistake. Hashtag story 7. The figure. We just moved into a large old house in a subdivision outside Toronto. It was Halloween night, and instead of trick-or-treating, my whole family, my parents, my 4 siblings, and me, were unpacking boxes and getting settled into our new bedrooms. It was late, past 11:30 p.m., when my mom finally released us from unpacking duty. I was 13 and exhausted, so I headed straight to my bedroom on the 2nd floor. I just wanted to sleep. About 20 minutes later, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my room. Heavy, deliberate footsteps walking back and forth. Thinking it was my younger brother trying to annoy me, I got up to yell at him to go to bed. I opened my door and looked out into the hallway. No one was there. The hallway was empty. All the other bedroom doors were closed, and the lights were off except for the small nightlight plugged in near the bathroom. I stood there for a moment listening, but there was nothing but silence. I went downstairs to the basement where my parents and siblings were still working. Was someone just upstairs? I asked. They all said no. They'd all been down there together for the past hour. A chill ran through me, but I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Moving into a new house, being overtired, the creaky old floors. It all made sense. I went back to my room and tried to put it out of my mind. My room was freezing. I'd left it warm when I went downstairs, but now it felt like I'd left a window open in the middle of winter. I had to put on a hoodie and wrap myself in an extra blanket just to stop shivering. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke up suddenly at 12:47 a.m. The house was completely quiet now. Everyone had gone to bed. Then I heard it again, footsteps in the hallway. But not just walking. They were right outside my door, pacing back and forth, back and forth. I sat up in bed, holding my breath, listening. The footsteps stopped. For maybe 30 seconds, there was complete silence. Then someone started pounding on my parents' bedroom door across the hall. Loud, aggressive pounding that echoed through the entire 2nd floor. Bang, 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 bang. I wanted to scream for my parents, but I was paralyzed with fear. The pounding went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. Then it stopped. I thought maybe my parents would come out to see what was happening, but their door stayed closed. The house fell silent again. That's when my bedroom door started to creak open, slowly, like someone was pushing it open with one finger. It was too dark to see who or what was opening my door. I could barely make out the doorway, just a faint light from the hallway nightlight, creating a dim glow. "Hey," I said, my voice cracking. "What are you doing? Who is it?" No answer. Just soft footsteps enter my room, moving closer to my bed. "Let me sleep," I said, try to sound annoyed instead of terrified. "Whoever this is, stop." The footsteps kept coming. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. I rolled onto my side, facing away from the door, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. The footsteps stopped right next to my bed. I couldn't help it. I had to look. I turned my head. A figure was standing beside my bed. Tall, at least 7 feet tall, completely black against the darkness of the room. Not like a shadow, but like a solid black shape, a silhouette of a person that was somehow darker than the darkness around it. It leaned down toward me. "Boo!" it whispered. I screamed louder than I've ever screamed in my life. I screamed until my throat hurt, until I couldn't breathe. The lights in the hallway flipped on. My door burst open, and my parents rushed in, my dad nearly falling over himself to hit my light switch. The room flooded with light. There was nothing there. No figure. No person. My room was completely empty, except for me, still screaming. My siblings now crowded in the doorway, staring at me like I'd lost my mind. There was someone here. I sobbed. Right next to my bed. They said, "Boo!" My mom rushed over and held me while my dad checked my closet, under my bed, behind my furniture. Nothing. "Did you hear the banging on your door?" I asked them frantically. "Someone was pounding on your door for like 5 minutes. My parents looked at each other, confused. "We didn't hear any knocking," my mom said softly. "We were both asleep until we heard you screaming." My siblings all confirmed they hadn't heard anything either. No footsteps. No pounding. Nothing. They all looked at me like I was crazy. Like I'd had a nightmare and couldn't tell the difference between dreams and reality. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. You can't imagine something that real, that specific. The footsteps, the pounding, the cold, the figure, the whispered boo right next to my ear. I slept in my parents' room for the next 2 weeks. I was 13 years old, and I didn't care if my siblings made fun of me. I couldn't go back into that room alone. We lived in that house for 3 more years before moving again. I never felt comfortable there. Sometimes I'd still hear the footsteps, still feel the cold spots, still sense something watching me from a hallway. My parents said it was just an old house settling, that the sounds were normal for a place that old. But I know what happened that Halloween night. Something was in that house with us. And whatever it was, it wanted me to know it was there. Hashtag story 8, the scare house. This happened 4 years ago when my friends and I were all 21. We'd reached that perfect age where haunted house attractions are genuinely fun without being too scary. Or so we thought. We bought tickets to an attraction called The Descent, Journey into Darkness. It was a local haunted house that had been operating for 4 consecutive years and had built a reputation as one of the most intense experiences in the state. We'd all heard amazing things about it. This particular year would be its final season. After Halloween 2014, it shut down permanently. After what happened to us, I understand why. The Descent wasn't a guided tour like most haunted houses. Instead, they gave you a simple mission. Find your way through the house, make it to the basement, locate one of the hidden keys, then find the exit door, and use your key to get out. It was basically a horror-themed escape room before those became popular. We started in an elaborate Victorian-style parlor. The attention to detail was incredible. A full-size coffin in the center of the room stood open and empty. Thick artificial spiderwebs covered every corner. Antique furniture was strategically placed throughout, and realistic blood stains marked the weathered wooden floorboards. The next room was a dining room, and that's where the lighting changed dramatically. From that point forward, every room was lit only by old-fashioned lanterns mounted on the walls, casting flickering shadows that moved and danced in ways that made your eyes play tricks on you. The scare started in the third room. Actors in genuinely terrifying costumes would burst out from hidden panels in the walls, their makeup and masks so realistic it was hard to believe they were just people. They got me every single time, even though I knew to expect them. The house was designed like a maze, narrow corridors, rooms that loop back on themselves, fake doors that open into walls, real doors hidden behind curtains. We spent probably 30 minutes just trying to find a basement entrance. When we finally found a door marked cellar, I have to admit I felt a spike of anxiety. None of us wanted to go down there. The staircase descended into complete and total darkness. Not dim lighting, not shadowy corners, actual pitch-black void. We started to wonder if we'd accidentally found a staff-only area, someplace guests weren't supposed to go. But the rules had been clear. Find the basement, find a key, find the exit. "This is so fucked up," my friend Rachel said, laughing nervously. We had no choice. If we wanted out, we had to go down. Each wooden step creaked under our weight. the sound echoing in the darkness below like something out of a nightmare. We were all laughing and cursing, trying to lighten the mood, but I could hear the genuine fear in everyone's voices. The basement was massive. I couldn't see the walls or the ceiling, just endless black in every direction. I kept my hands stretched out in front of me, shuffling forward carefully, terrified I'd walk straight into a wall or fall into something.
The mountain retreat. I booked a secluded cabin in the mountains 2 years ago. Nothing special planned, just needed to disconnect from everything for a few days. The cabin was about 5 hours north of where I lived, tucked deep in the forest with maybe 2 or 3 other properties scattered within a couple miles. Perfect isolation, exactly what I was looking for. I arrived Thursday afternoon, spent some time exploring the property and testing out the hot tub on the deck. Later that evening, I was sitting outside watching the sunset when I noticed someone walking through the trees about 100 yards out. Just looked like a regular hiker, probably staying at one of the nearby cabins. He disappeared deeper into the woods and I thought nothing of it. I stayed outside for maybe another 2 hours before heading in to make dinner and watch something on my laptop. Around 11 that night, while I was watching a show, I heard footsteps on the deck outside. Heavy, deliberate footsteps like someone was pacing back and forth. I paused what I was watching and listened. The footsteps stopped. I got up slowly and walked to the sliding glass door, but when I looked out, there was nobody there. The deck was empty. I checked all the windows, nothing. Must have been an animal, I told myself. The next morning I woke up early and made coffee, then went back out to the deck. That's when I saw him again, that same man from yesterday, walking through the exact same spot in the woods. Same path, same direction. My stomach turned a little because I realized he definitely wasn't lost like I'd assumed if someone knocked on my door asking for directions. But nobody knocked. Not that day anyway. I spent most of Friday indoors, working on my laptop and trying to relax, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I looked out the window toward the woods, I half expected to see him standing there. Night came and I made sure every door and window was locked before going to bed. I even pushed a chair against the sliding glass door for extra security. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of scratching. Not aggressive scratching, but slow, methodical, like someone dragging their fingernails down the outside of the cabin wall. It moved along the side of the building, from the living room toward my bedroom. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, pointing it at the window. The scratching stopped immediately. I waited, barely breathing, but heard nothing else. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Saturday morning, I packed everything up as fast as I could. I wasn't staying another night. As I was loading my car, I found deep scratch marks on the side of the cabin, too high up to be from any animal. They were at eye level, running in long lines across the wood. I got in my car and started driving down the gravel road when I glanced in my rearview mirror. He was standing on my deck, watching me leave, just standing there, perfectly still, like he'd been waiting for me to see him. I called the property owner when I got home, told him everything. His response was cold, almost annoyed. He said I must have been mistaken, that there are no other guests up there this time of year, and the nearest neighbor is an elderly woman who never leaves her house. To this day, I still don't know who that man was or what he wanted, but the image of him standing on that deck, watching me drive away, still haunts me every time I close my eyes. Story 2, the solo camping trip. I'm 31 and I live in northern Montana, right along the edge of Glacier National Park. I've been backcountry camping and hiking for about 7 years now, always pushing myself to go further, stay longer, explore deeper into the wilderness. My buddy Jake usually comes with me, but last September he had to bail last minute because of work. I'd already taken the time off and had everything ready to go, so I decided to do it solo. It was going to be a 6-day trek through some of the more remote areas of the park, ending at a glacial lake that sits at the base of a massive granite peak. Day 1 and 2 went perfectly. Clear skies, cool weather, and barely any bugs. I made good time and set up camp each night near reliable water sources. On the 3rd day, I pushed hard to reach the lake before sunset. I got there with about an hour of daylight left and found the perfect spot to set up my tent, right on the edge of the tree line with a clear view of the water. I gathered firewood and got a small fire going, then cooked some freeze-dried food and sat there watching the lake turn dark as the sun disappeared. The stars were incredible. No light pollution for miles. I stayed up late just staring at the sky before finally crawling into my tent around midnight. I fell asleep fast, exhausted from the hike. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of something moving outside my tent. Not an animal, at least not a four-legged one. These were footsteps, crunching through the gravel and pine needles around my campsite. I lay there frozen, listening. The footsteps circled my tent slowly, deliberately. They stopped right outside the door. I could hear breathing, heavy and ragged. My hand was on my knife, ready to cut through the tent wall and run if I had to. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps moved away, back toward the lake. I waited another hour before I finally worked up the nerve to unzip my tent and look outside. Nothing. The fire had died down to embers, and the moonlight reflected off the lake, but I didn't see anyone. In the morning, I found footprints around my tent. Bare footprints. Human. They circled my tent multiple times, then led down to the edge of the lake and disappeared into the water. I packed up immediately. I didn't care about finishing the trip. I just wanted to get back to civilization. The hike out took me 2 full days, and the entire time I felt like someone was following me. I never saw anyone, but I'd hear branches snap behind me, or catch movement in my peripheral vision. When I finally got back to my truck, I found my backpack was lighter than I remembered. I checked everything and realized food was missing. Protein bars, trail mix, even a water filter. Things I definitely had packed. The only explanation is that someone went through my bag while I was sleeping that first night. I reported it to the park rangers, but they said there hadn't been any reports of anyone else in that area. They suggested it might have been a bear, but bears don't leave bare human footprints. Bears don't circle tents like they're studying what's inside. I haven't been back to that lake since, and I don't think I ever will. Story 3, The Storm. My roommate went home for spring break last year, so I had our apartment to myself for the whole week. No classes, no responsibilities, just pure relaxation time. Tuesday night, a massive storm rolled in. I'm talking about wind so strong it was bending trees almost horizontal, rain coming down in sheets, and thunder that shook the whole building. These kinds of storms hit our area every spring, but they always feel worse than you remember. I knew there was no way I'd be able to sleep with all that noise, so I stayed up playing video games in the living room. Around midnight, the doorbell rang. I paused my game and sat there for a second, confused. Who would be outside in this weather? I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Nothing. No one was there. I opened the door anyway, and the wind hit me like a wall. I looked around the front porch, down the steps, but there was no one around. Maybe the wind knocked something into the doorbell, I thought. I closed the door and went back to my game, but I'd only been playing for maybe 5 minutes when I heard a loud crash from the backyard. I ran to the back door and looked outside. Our patio furniture was scattered everywhere, being thrown around by the wind. I quickly put on my shoes and ran outside to grab everything before it blew away or broke something. The rain was coming down so hard it actually hurt when it hit my face. I was soaking wet within seconds, grabbing chairs and dragging them against the house where they'd be more protected. That's when I saw someone standing at the back fence, just watching me. They were completely still, not even trying to shield themselves from the rain. I stopped and stared back for a second, but then I grabbed the last chair and ran back inside. When I looked out the window, they were gone. Between the doorbell and now this person in my backyard, I was starting to feel uneasy. I made sure all the doors and windows were locked before I tried to relax again. I ended up falling asleep on the couch around 2 in the morning. The storm was still going strong, but I was exhausted. A few hours later, maybe 4 or 5 in the morning, I woke up to the house shaking from a particularly strong gust of wind. I sat up and was about to check if the patio furniture was still secure when I put my feet down on the floor and felt water. I looked down and saw a puddle right next to the couch, and then another one, and another one, trailing across the living room floor. My heart started racing. I stood up and followed the trail. They were footprints, muddy and wet, leading through the entire house. Up the stairs, down the stairs, into every room. The back door was still locked, but someone had been inside while I was sleeping. I grabbed my phone and called the police, then hid in the bathroom until they arrived. When they got there, they checked everything but couldn't find anyone. They said it looked like someone had come in through the back door, but I know for a fact I locked it. The police said it seemed personal because nothing was taken. Whoever it was walked right past my laptop, my TV, my wallet, and didn't touch anything. They just walked through the entire house while I was asleep on the couch. After some thought, I realized it might have been meant for my roommate. Maybe someone thought he was home alone, saw me instead, and decided to leave. If my roommate had been there that night, I think things would have ended very differently. Story 4. The House Sitter. Last summer, my friend Sarah asked me to house sit for her while she and her husband went on a 3-week trip to Europe. She had a couple of cats, some fish tanks, and a lot of plants that needed attention, so I agreed to help out. Plus, her house was way nicer than my studio apartment, so it felt like a mini vacation for me too. The first 2 weeks were great. I'd go over after work, feed the cats, water the plants, and hang out in her living room watching TV on her massive screen. It was perfect. Then one night during the 3rd week, I was sitting at the kitchen table eating dinner when I heard someone cough outside. It was a man's cough, deep and raspy, and it sounded like it was right outside the back door. I froze. The back door had a window, but the curtain was closed. I slowly walked over and turned on the outdoor light, hoping that would scare whoever it was away. I waited for a minute before looking outside. No one was there. I tried to brush it off, but I stayed on edge for the rest of the night. Around 8 o'clock, I decided to go pick up some food since Sarah's fridge was pretty empty. But as I was walking to my car, I noticed something weird in the front yard. The grass was pressed down in a line like someone had walked from the sidewalk straight to the back of the house, and then back to the sidewalk again. I followed the path with my eyes and felt my stomach drop. Why would someone do that? I got in my car and drove to get food, but the whole time I was thinking about those footprints. When I got back, I checked the yard again with my phone flashlight. The footprints were still there, but there weren't any new ones. I went back inside and tried to relax by watching TV, but I couldn't focus. Around 11, I decided to go to bed. I was lying there scrolling on my phone when I heard footsteps outside again. This time they were in the front yard, walking slowly across the grass. I heard them stop at the front door. Then I heard the doorknob rattle, like someone was testing to see if it was locked. I sat up in bed, barely breathing. Then the footsteps moved around to the back door, and I heard that knob rattle too. I turned on the downstairs lights from my phone app, hoping it would scare them off. The footsteps stopped. I got out of bed and crept to the top of the stairs, looking down at the back door. No one was there, but then I heard glass shatter in the living room. I ran back into the bedroom and locked the door as I heard someone climbing through the broken window. They were inside. I called the police, but I could hear them downstairs destroying everything. Smashing furniture, throwing things, breaking dishes. It sounded like pure chaos. After a few minutes of that, they ran upstairs and started doing the same thing to the other rooms. Then they came to the bedroom I was in. They tried the handle, but it was locked. Instead of leaving, they started slamming something against the door, trying to break it down. Part of the door splintered and I could see a hand reach through, trying to unlock it from the inside. The door flew open and a man stepped in. He was wearing a ski mask and holding a crowbar. He looked at me, and I thought that was it. But he didn't touch me. He just started smashing everything in the room, the mirror, the dresser, the lamps. He completely ignored me. After he destroyed the bedroom, he walked right past me and went to the next room. Then he finally left, running down the stairs and out through the broken window. I stood there frozen until the police arrived. When Sarah came home the next day, her entire house was destroyed. Nothing was stolen, just destroyed. The police said it had to be someone she knew, someone with a grudge, but she couldn't think of anyone who would do something like this. The scariest part wasn't the destruction. It was the way he looked at me and then just went back to smashing things. Like I wasn't even worth his time. Like I wasn't the target. Story 5, the gas station. I work overnight shifts at a gas station, which I know sounds like the setup to every horror story ever told. But when you're actually working there, you don't expect anything to happen to you. This particular night, it was raining pretty hard. Not a downpour, but steady enough that people didn't want to be outside. That meant fewer customers, which meant more time on my phone scrolling through social media and trying to stay awake. Around 1 in the morning, I heard someone tapping on the glass door. I looked up and saw a man standing outside in the rain. He had his hood pulled up so I couldn't see his face. I waved at him, signaling that the door was unlocked and he could come in. He didn't move. He just kept tapping on the glass like he couldn't see me. I got up and walked over to the door, pulling it open for him. He brushed past me without looking and walked. I went back around and asked what he needed. He asked for a pack of cigarettes, paid with cash, and left without saying anything else. I watched him walk out into the rain, and that's when I noticed there were no cars in the parking lot. No car at the pumps either. He just walked to the road and kept walking along the shoulder, disappearing into the rain. It was strange, but I figured maybe his car broke down somewhere and he needed the cigarettes to calm his nerves or something. An hour passed with no other customers. I was stocking shelves in one of the aisles when I heard that same tapping on the glass. I walked back around the corner and saw the same man standing outside again. I opened the door and asked if he was okay, if he needed to borrow the phone or call someone. He didn't respond. He just stood there staring at me with those hollow eyes. I tried again, asking if there was something I could help him with. He finally spoke, pointing down the road and saying something I couldn't understand. His voice was rough and quiet. Then he pointed at a gas can sitting by one of the pumps and said, "Help." I assumed his car must have run out of gas somewhere down the road. I walked outside with him and started filling up the gas can with his credit card. The whole time he was standing behind me, just out of my line of sight. It made me really uncomfortable. Once the can was full, I quickly handed it to him and started walking back to the door. But then he grabbed my arm and started talking fast in a language I didn't understand. I pulled away and walked faster, but he yelled something. I turned around and saw another man inside the gas station behind the counter, shoving things into his backpack. He looked up at me and immediately jumped over the counter, running toward the door. Then everything went black. I woke up on the floor with the worst headache of my life. It had only been a few minutes since the incident. I realized the guy outside had hit me over the head with something to help his partner escape. I called the cops and they took me to the hospital where I got stitches and was treated for a concussion. The worst part is how stupid I felt afterward. Like I'd been played so easily. But honestly, I'm lucky. The security footage showed the guy inside had a gun. If I tried to stop him or even reacted wrong, I might not be here to tell this story. Story 6. The Dog Sitter. I'm 33 now, but this happened when I was 31, back in early 2021. My friend Michelle told me her coworker, I'll call her Dana, needed a dog sitter because she and her husband were going on vacation for a week. Michelle knew I did pet sitting through an app called Wag, so she thought I'd be perfect for it. Dana offered me $300 to watch her German Shepherd named Rex for 7 days. Easy money, so I agreed. She showed me around her house the week before, introduced me to Rex, who was huge but friendly, and gave me the code to her front door lock. The first few days were totally normal. I'd go to work, come back during my lunch break to let Rex out and feed him, then spend the evenings there watching TV with him. Dana's house was really nice, much bigger than my apartment, and she told me to help myself to whatever was in the fridge. On the fourth night, Wednesday, I was sitting on the couch watching a movie when someone knocked on the front door. I looked through the peephole and saw a man in what looked like a police uniform standing on the porch. I opened the door to see what he needed. He smiled and said he was looking for someone named Robert. I told him there was no Robert here, that I was just dog sitting for a friend. Looking back, that was such a stupid thing to say to a stranger. He asked how long I was staying. I told him until Saturday. He nodded and said, "Oh, that's cool," and then apologized for bothering me before walking away. I locked the door and texted Dana about it. She just responded with weird, and didn't seem concerned at all. That bothered me too, but I tried to forget about it. Thursday went by with no issues. I went to bed around midnight and fell asleep pretty quickly. But at 3:15 in the morning, Rex started barking like crazy. I got up and went to the living room where Rex was standing at the front door, growling and barking aggressively. I looked through the peephole and saw two men standing outside. One of them was the same guy from before, and they were both wearing security guard uniforms now. 3 in the morning. I didn't open the door. I didn't say anything. I just watched them through the peephole until they finally walked away. I looked out the side window and didn't see any security vehicle anywhere. No car at all. I think Rex barking scared them off. I went back to bed but barely slept the rest of the night. I didn't tell Dana about it because she was on vacation and there was nothing she could do anyway. I only had one more night to stay there, and then I'd be done. I thought about leaving early but I needed the money. Friday night was my last night. I made sure every door and window was locked before going to bed. Rex slept in the room with me this time. Around midnight, I heard footsteps on the back patio. Rex heard it too and started growling. The footsteps got closer to the sliding glass door, and then I heard someone trying to open it. I grabbed my phone and called the police, whispering everything that was happening. The person stopped trying to open the door, but I could see their shadow through the curtains. They were just standing there. The police arrived about 10 minutes later, and whoever was outside was gone by then. They searched the property but didn't find anyone. They took a report and told me to call if anything else happened. I didn't sleep at all that night. Dana came back Saturday afternoon and I told her everything. She seemed more concerned this time but didn't have any idea who it could have been. I never went back to dog sit after that. I don't know who those men were or what they wanted, but I'm convinced Rex saved me that night. If he hadn't been there barking, I think they would have gotten inside. Story 7. The Road Trip. Last year I went on a 2-week road trip across the Southwest. I didn't plan anything in advance, no hotel reservations or anything. I just wanted to drive and see where I ended up each day. I figured I could always find a hotel that accepted walk-ins. The first week went perfectly. I found decent hotels every night with no issues. But on the 8th night I ran into problems. I was driving between cities and started getting really tired around midnight. I wanted to push through to the next major city, but my eyes were getting too heavy. I pulled over and tried calling several big chain hotels along my route, but none of them were accepting walk-ins at that hour. I was starting to panic, thinking I might have to sleep in my car on the side of the road, which felt dangerous. Then I saw a sign for a motel 10 miles ahead. When I got there, it was small, more like something from the 70s that had never been updated. There were only a few cars in the parking lot. The whole place felt abandoned. I went inside and the woman at the desk said they had rooms available. I paid cash and she gave me a key to room 8, which was at the far end of the building. The room was outdated but clean enough. I brought my bag inside and locked the door behind me. Less than 2 minutes later, there was a knock. I opened it and saw a man standing there, mumbling to himself. The second he saw the door open, he tried to push his way inside. I put my arm out and stopped him. He kept mumbling, not making any sense, and I told him firmly to leave. After a few seconds, he turned around and walked away. I immediately locked the door and put the chain bolt on. I figured he was probably just high and got confused about which room was his. I tried to brush it off and went to bed. A few hours later, I woke up to banging on my door. Loud, aggressive banging. I knew it was the same man from before. I put the chain on earlier, so I cracked the door open just to tell him to go away. The second I unlocked it, he rammed into the door with his full body weight. The chain held, but he kept slamming into it over and over, yelling random words that made no sense. I backed away and called the police. He didn't stop though. He started shoving a knife through the gap, trying to cut the chain. It wasn't gonna work, but seeing that knife made my blood run cold. This wasn't just some confused guy. He wanted in. The banging and yelling went on for several minutes before it suddenly stopped. When the police arrived, he was gone. They searched the area but couldn't find him. They told me the car he used to book the room was reported stolen. I checked out immediately and drove to the next town, where I found a proper hotel. I didn't sleep well for the rest of that trip. I kept thinking about how easily things could have gone wrong. If I hadn't put that chain on, or if I'd opened the door fully, he would have gotten inside. I still have this feeling sometimes, like I'm being watched. I know he probably wasn't targeting me specifically, but it doesn't make it any less terrifying. Story 8. The New Neighbor. I moved across the state last year after my old landlord decided to sell his property and kicked me out when the lease ended. I found a newly built house in a quiet neighborhood and signed a lease agreement right away. I was actually excited about it because it was much nicer than my old place. As soon as I moved in, though, I noticed my neighbor across the street watching me. He was a middle-aged guy, probably in his late 40s, and he never seemed to leave his house. Every time I looked out my window, he was either standing in his yard or watching from his window. I tried to tell myself he was just curious about the new neighbor, but the more I saw him, the more uncomfortable I became. He never smiled, never waved, never acknowledged me. He just watched. I catch him in his driveway at weird hours, like 2 or 3 in the morning, just standing there staring at my house. It was getting to the point where I didn't want to go outside. One night, I heard someone walking around in my backyard. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, circling the perimeter of my fence. I looked out the window but couldn't see anyone in the dark. The footsteps eventually stopped, but I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I saw him again, standing in his driveway, staring at my house. I closed the curtains and tried to ignore it, but I was starting to feel like I was being stalked. A few days later, I got home from work late and went straight to bed. But in the middle of the night, I woke up to a loud thud against the side of the house. It sounded like it came from right outside my bedroom window, which was on the 2nd floor. I slowly got out of bed and pulled back the curtain. My heart nearly stopped. My neighbor was standing on a ladder, his face inches from my window, staring at me. When he saw me looking, he quickly climbed down and ran away. I called the police immediately, and they caught him a few minutes later trying to get the ladder down. He didn't admit to what he was doing, but it was obvious. Later, another neighbor came by and told me they'd had strange encounters with him too. They said they saw him looking through their windows one night when they were coming home from work. Part of me wishes they'd reported him sooner, but at least it's over now. Or at least I hope it is. Story 9. The Roommate. I lived with my older brother for about 5 years after I finished college. We split rent on a 2-bedroom apartment since neither of us could afford anything on our own. But during the 5th year, my brother got a promotion and decided to move out once our lease was up. I couldn't afford the place by myself, so I started looking for a roommate. I spent months searching online but couldn't find anyone. Eventually, I decided to just move out too and find something cheaper. Time was running out. My brother had already moved most of his stuff out, and I was scrambling to find a new place. My budget was extremely low, which made it even harder. Then I found a listing from a guy named Marcus who was renting out a room in his house. The price was perfect, so I texted him right away. We scheduled a call later that day, and he explained that he lived alone and was renting out his spare bedroom. I'd have access to the whole house, not just the room. Sounded great, so I agreed. A couple weeks later, I rented a moving truck and drove to his house. I hadn't seen the place in person yet, but he'd sent me pictures and it looked nice enough. When I got there, Marcus was waiting in the garage. He seemed normal, maybe mid-30s, kind of quiet and awkward. He helped me unload all my stuff into the room, and after we finished, I returned the truck. By the time I got back, it was almost 9 at night. Marcus was watching TV on the couch, so I told him I was exhausted and going to bed early. He just nodded. I went to my room and started unpacking. Around 10, I went to lock my door and turn off the lights. But when I reached for the doorknob, I realized there was no lock. Or rather, the lock was on the outside of the door. I stepped back into the hallway and asked Marcus why the lock was on the outside. He looked confused and said he'd never noticed, but he'd switch it around tomorrow. I said okay and went back to my room. I was too tired to worry about it. I got in bed and fell asleep within minutes. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. I assumed Marcus was just getting water or something. But then the footsteps stopped outside my door. I heard him standing there for a few seconds before I heard a click. He locked me in. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. I heard him walk back to his room and close the door. I immediately got up and tried my door handle. It wouldn't turn. I started yelling for Marcus to open the door. Within seconds, he ran back and unlocked it. I swung the door open, furious. He was stumbling over his words, saying he just wanted to make sure he was safe because he didn't know me. I told him locking someone in a room wasn't the way to handle that. I said I was packing up and leaving in the morning. I stayed up all night on the couch in the living room, watching his bedroom door. At 9 in the morning, I drove to a moving truck rental place and brought it back to the house. But when I got back, Marcus's bedroom door was open and he was gone. I called out for him but got no response. His room was completely empty, like he'd never been there at all. I didn't have time to think about it. I started moving my stuff as fast as I could. After 2 hours, I only had 2 boxes left. I ran inside to grab another one, but Marcus was suddenly standing in the doorway, blocking my path. I told him to move. He just stared at me with this blank expression. After a few seconds, he stepped aside and I rushed past him. I threw the box in the truck and went back for the last one. It was half full of food from my old apartment. I decided to just leave it. Marcus was freaking me out and I wanted to get out of there. I started closing the back of the truck when Marcus appeared holding the last box. He said I forgot it. I grabbed it from him and climbed into the truck to stack it with the others. As I turned around, Marcus had his hand on the door and was pulling it down, trying to lock me inside. I shoved the door back up before it closed and pushed him. He fell to the ground but then got up and ran. Not into the house but into the woods behind the property. I jumped out, slammed the door shut, and drove straight to my brother's place. He let me stay with him until I found a new apartment. I don't know what Marcus's plan was or what would have happened if I'd stayed, but I'm glad I left when I did. Story 10. The Hotel Receptionist. I'm a night shift receptionist at a small hotel in my town. Most of my job is checking in late arrivals, answering phone calls, and monitoring the security cameras. It's usually quiet since we're not a huge hotel and we rarely fill up completely. This particular night, we only had a few guests. I was sitting at the front desk scrolling on my phone when I saw a man approaching the entrance. I stood up and greeted him as he walked in. He looked rough. His eyes were bloodshot and he kept scratching his arms. He asked for a room and I checked him in without any issues. We allowed walk-ins when we were under 75% capacity. He took his key and walked toward the elevators. I sat back down and went back to my phone. A few hours later, I heard a loud banging noise coming from somewhere in the building. It sounded like someone was trying to force open a door. I got up and walked down the hallway to investigate. At the end of the hall, I saw the man from earlier trying to open one of our maintenance closets. I asked if he needed help finding something, but he just stared at me with those disturbing eyes. I asked again, but he didn't respond. I didn't want to make him angry, so I just went back to my desk and let it go. I figured he was looking for a vending machine or something and got confused. Time passed without any more incidents. It was around 3:30 in the morning when I decided to do a quick walk around the first floor to stay awake. But as I was walking past the hallway near the front desk, I heard loud banging coming from upstairs. I stopped and listened. It was coming from the second floor. I went up the stairs and walked down the hall, but everything was quiet now. Then I noticed one of the room doors was open. I walked up to it and knocked softly. No one answered. I peeked inside and it looked empty. I wasn't comfortable going all the way in, but from what I could see, no one was there. I closed the door and checked the room number, 112. That was the room I'd given to the man earlier. I went back downstairs, confused. I hadn't seen him leave the building. I checked all the security camera feeds, but he wasn't anywhere in the lobby or outside. Then the phone rang. It was a guest on the third floor saying someone had been knocking on their door in the middle of the night. I apologized and said I'd take care of it. Right after I hung up, the phone rang again. Another guest, different room, same complaint. I called the police immediately. I stood by the front doors until they arrived, just in case I needed to run. Thankfully they got there quickly, but they didn't find the man. Instead, they found a broken window in his room. He jumped out of the second-story window and disappeared. Later, the police told me the credit card he used to book the room was stolen. They had no idea who he was or what he was trying to do. I'm just glad none of the guests opened their doors. I don't know what he wanted, but it couldn't have been anything good.